everyone. I'm Alan Schimmel. That's Luca Galente, and you're watching the Platform Engineering Show. Hey, Luca, Happy New Year. It's great to see you, my friend. How are you?
You too. I'm good. How are you doing? Happy New Year. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, Happy New Year to everyone. So, Luca, let's play Where's Luca? Where in the world are you today, man?
East Coast of Sri Lanka.
The East Coast of Sri Lanka. That's great. And it's nice and warm there. You're on the beach.
Yeah, I mean,
All you
apparently
folks
it's warmer than in
freezing.
Florida, right?
Yeah, well, winter came to Florida, right? But we get this around this time of year. We'll get like 3-4 days. I was telling you where sometimes it'll go down even into the high 30s, low 40s Fahrenheit, and then the iguanas they're not native, but they're invasive here. They get frozen up in the palm trees, and they go what they call torpid, like they just shut down. And then they fall out of trees. And some of these iguanas are like 4 feet tall. I mean, they're big. They're big reptiles. So you don't want them falling on your head. You'll get hurt. But
This is so fascinating to me.
crazy.
This is crazy. But do
Yeah.
they recover or are they dead?
It depends how long and how cold
How
they
long?
are. Because, iguanas are usually like that nice green color. And then when
Right.
they're in breeding colors, they get red and orange. When they get torpid like that, they turn gray. It's like they really
super dark.
they look like off. Yeah.
Crazy.
But yeah, we'll see. I mean, no, they're kind of like a nuisance animal here, so people aren't terribly upset that some iguanas die. They don't belong here. They're a mess. They're a mess.
Right.
Anyway, enough about iguanas. You're in Sri Lanka. There's a lot going on in the world of platform engineering, though. We got a great topic to cover today, but before we do, I wanted to just go over with you a few things. First of all, we're making plans here to head over to London for KubeCon. I think it's April 1st to the 4th is the actual KubeCon. But I know the community has some real big plans going on. You want to share a little?
It's gonna be a big one. KubeCon, right, in London. They're expecting 12,000 people. And so we do our sort of like unofficial KubeCon opening party, which is called House of Cube. We've been doing it now for like 2 or 3 years. It grows every time. Expecting a lot of people, probably like 4,000 plus signups. There's probably going to be like 500 people, 600 people at the location. It's going to be pretty crazy. And the whole thing of House of Cube's like, we started it when I think we were at KubeCon Valencia, and it was basically,
I love that
we were kind of
Valencia
going from like, which was great because it's like Valencia and so on, but we were basically going from like one party to the next. And like, man, all these parties are the same. And obviously, we have like a Berlin background, techno background. So we were kind of like, wouldn't it be funny to do the sort of like the dark room of DevOps? And for those that catch the reference, and so it started like as a joke, but we did it. And it's really funny because there's a bit of a tension with the CNCF guidelines that basically don't allow you to say in the dark room of DevOps. So we started and now it grew to basically really become the unofficial opening party. We have like drag queen shows and it's a whole thing. So that's going to be really fun.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. Looking forward to that one.
Kind of like Key West. Down here, that's, I don't know if you've ever been down to Key West, but a lot of that.
But I heard,
yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, there are other places that are more, but anyway, I digress. Where can people get more information about House of Cube?
Just go houseofcube.com and you can sign up. It's free. We have amazing food, amazing drinks, amazing drag queens. So just come, have fun, let's party.
We're going to do that. That's fun. That sounds great. And then the other, big thing on the horizon, and it's not too early to get this out there, is this is the 3rd or 4th Platform Con.
This is
coming
the
up in
4th
June.
Platform Con. So we started 22.
Right.
We had I think 6,000 people or so joining virtually. Then we had PlatformCon 23. We had 20,000. At 24 last year, we had 35,000 or something. And then expecting over 40,000 this year. But the important thing this year is that we're really doubling down on the in-person components. So we're going to have 2 live days, one in London, one in New York, both around like 400 or 500 people. We have great speakers, Nikki Watt, Gregor Hope, Kelsey Hightower speaking at these things live. So really excited about that. It's going to be last week of June. So London on the 25th of June and New York on the 26th of June. So it's going to be fun to like hop between one city and the next. But I think the events are going to be great. We're going to have parties. We have like a lot of great like speakers, live trainings, a lot of new formats that we're rolling out for this. And people can already sign up, platformcon.com, and you can choose your own adventure and join us either virtually or in person, London and New York.
I think TechStrong TV will be in New York. I'd love to come home to New York. And we'll be broadcasting live from there as well.
Yes.
So it should be a fun thing. And that's platformcon.com.
Yeah.
Right? Fantastic. All speakers have been assigned. What about sponsorships available?
Yeah, sponsorship still available. Almost sold out of New York. That's going pretty quickly. And we're closed with London, but there's a lot of like, there's like also virtual sponsorships that are still open.
Sure.
So anyway, sponsorship still open. And there's a lot of like interesting formats that, as I said, we rolled out the trainings, but also, we're going to do live interviews with you in New York, for example. So lots of new interesting things that I think can be very fun as well to do with vendors and other sponsors.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, Luca, we got to talk about what we're talking about. This is our 3rd episode. Yep. This is our 3rd episode. This will probably be the last one where it's just you and I talking like this. Well, we got to bring in some fresh blood, some expertise, and, we'll announce Checkmarks is going to sponsor our show. So many thanks to them for that. We're looking at other sponsors if anyone out there might be interested. But for today, Luca, we're going to talk about platform as a product. And look, in today's world, right, there's platform as a product because everything is as a service, right? So here we got PAAP, and I'm sure the next thing will be PAAS. But, what does it actually mean when we talk about platform as a product? And, it's a key part of this platform engineering kind of mindset. But, you're the expert. Why don't you define it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think is a good place to start from the PaaS that you mentioned, right? So like the platform as a service, right? This is just as kind of like one of sort of the main trends. If you look back like 15, 20 years ago, like Heroku, all those guys.
Heroku
right?
start, yeah.
Yeah, and it was this idea of like, hey, like don't worry about anything, right? Like we build this like platform layer for you. It's it's like turnkey, plug and play, let's go. And that didn't really scale to the enterprise, right? Because like everybody realized, hey, you actually need some customized platform layer for your own enterprise engineering organization. And that's kind of what platform engineering sort of like, where we're sort of like platform as a service or PaaS ends and sort of like platform engineering starts is really this idea of like, hey, you're building this internal product for internal consumption, right? Like your internal customers are your application developers, and you do that as a product, right? And that's like a very, it's probably, in my opinion, the key concept, the key foundational concept of platform engineering, and also the key differentiator, of platform engineers vis-a-vis, let's say, like a DevOps engineer or an SRE. That normally we'd approach infrastructure project as a kind of like one and done, 6 months project, something of that kind. Whereas a platform engineer, at least like a good one, approaches building an internal developer platform or IDP, which is the end product of a platform engineering initiative, as a product, right? So a product that has a life cycle, not that it's not like a one and done, 6 months thing, but it's being rolled out as a minimum viable platform initially for the first few months, and then iterated on, and then eventually grows. It gets adopted widely across the engineer organization, right? And it keeps being worked on as a product. And I think it's a super interesting concept, because the moment you look at your internal developer platform as a product, you immediately unlock, 20, 30 years of product management best practices and experience that we have in the industry that can be applied to build your internal developer platform as a product.
And here's the thing. Whenever you talk about something as a product, the next logical conclusion is, who's the customer, right? And traditionally that was in IT, right? In the IT department, I'm going back now, 25, 30 years. The IT department, the customer was the internal business, right? IT wasn't sort of forward external facing. IT was internal facing.
Right.
And your customer was the sales guy, the business guy, the marketing person, the HR department, all of the above. IT serviced them. IT, they were the customer of the IT department. So this is not new in terms of a concept of that internal customer that gets served, in this case with the platform. The other thing I'll tell you is, look, when cloud first came out, a lot of people were very definitive about saying, well, this is infrastructure as a service, IaaS, right? And we're going to have platform as a service, right? And Heroku was probably the biggest success coming out of that. But really, to a lot of people, that meant, well, infrastructure as service ended at kind of the hypervisor. They took care of everything hypervisor and below, and you built on top of the hypervisor, OS and everything else in it. Platform as a service initially to a lot of people was, well, no, everything up through the OS, and then you just build your app on top of the OS. And I'll tell you my 2 cents on it. If it wasn't for platform as a service not being sort of a complete concept, you never would have had cloud native. I think what we see as cloud native today with the containers and Kube and Mesh and everything, that whole cloud native stack is a better platform as a service, or as a result of the initial Heroku style platform as a service just not being complete enough, right? It wasn't what we need. And then, so now you got this cloud native stack, and now you have this whole platform engineering kind of movement, right? Which is borrowing from a lot of what's gone on here. And that's the modern platform as a product, platform as a service that I think people were really thinking about back when, but the initial Heroku versions were, I don't want to say flawed, but incomplete. They were immature, right?
Yeah.
And
I
so,
think they were like
no,
a child
that's my 2 cents.
of its time, right? Also I think stacks that were like a lot simpler, right? Infrastructure that were a lot simpler. But then to your point, right? As cloud native exploded, as this complexity really exploded as well, then you had to have a completely different approach. So it's the idea is, hey, I still want to provide a PaaS-like experience to my developers, right? And I think your point earlier is super interesting, right? It's also not only the complexity of the infrastructure exploded, but also the size of the engineering organization exploded to the point where now you have a part of the engineering organization that's serving the other part of the engineering organization as its internal customers, and no longer just the sales, marketing, HR, whatever, right? The other functions. And there's also a mindset shift that needs to happen a lot of times, where it's well, actually the internal customers is the developer itself, right? which is something that a lot of people are not used to because they think, well, developers kind of build stuff for themselves. Well, but the problem is like once you have, 10,000 developers, then you actually need somebody that like specifically builds stuff for them, right? So, so the idea is really like, hey, I want to build a PaaS-like experience for developers, but on top of, a complex and changing and cloud native or hybrid tool chain. And so therefore I need to take, the vision is the same. I take the tool set, the toolbox of, I borrow it from kind of like all this other like adjacent disciplines. And then really like I focus with this like product mindset on building this like, so like platform layer, developer, DevOps layer on top of this increasingly complex stack, right?
Absolutely. Hey, you mentioned DevOps. I just want to give a quick shout out. We're going to do our first live roundtable of the Platform Engineering Show, I think early in February, and it's on DevOps. So if DevOps is something you guys are interested in, you folks are interested in, stay tuned. We've got a live one where you can take part and ask questions, and we're going to dive into that. Now, Luca, the platform is a product idea. It's been percolating now for a couple of years. And we're starting to see, I don't know if I want to call it best practices yet or, evolving best practices. I don't know if it's written in stone, everything just yet. But we're starting to certainly see where, hey, this works. This is not such a good idea. There's a better way of doing that. We're evolving best practices. Can you talk a little bit about what some of these are and where people can kind of, stay in the know on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like, and as I mentioned, like, I think what's interesting is the moment you treat your internal product, your internal platform as a product, you unlock all this like best practice. Like, so it's not like you need to invent anything radically new. It's like, hey, there is this minimum viable product, MVP concept. It's just being rebranded to minimum viable platform, which is the same exact letters. And the concept is the same. It's like, hey, start small, iterate quickly, and so on. I'll talk about MVP in a second. But I think like before that, even like if we look, I think chronologically at how I've seen the space sort of like mature in the last couple of years. Initially it was kind of like, okay, like what is platform engineering? Is this helpful for me? Now it's like a lot of people are like really bought in to the concept, like it's been, compounding like crazy. And we spoke about the overall, like, numbers about platform engineering as a trend broadly in the other episodes. But, with that, a lot of people are coming in and are like, okay, I'm bought in. I heard this is cool. Where do I start? Right? Like, what does this thing actually look like? And how do I make sense of this? Yes, we have like a crazy, like cloud native and so on landscape. You can just see the CNCF landscape is insane. Like nobody can actually really understand it. But even the platform engineering, it makes for a good picture, exactly. But even the platform engineering landscape at this point has been developing so much that it's far from that level of complexity. But you already have, like, if you're a newcomer and it's like, okay, like how do I actually piece all this from pieces of the puzzle together for a platform that actually works for me, that makes sense for my engineering organization, right? And so that's where I think the first sort of like standard that's been really, really helpful and a game changer, I think, in the community and broadly in the platform engineering market has been this reference architectures for interior developer platforms, right? And some of the first ones were open source by McKinsey, actually. And then, kind of like now they're like really widely adopted. I have one stat for you on that, which is PlatformCon. The first reference architecture was kind of like presented in the talk at PlatformCon 23. And so there was only one. At PlatformCon 24 last year, there were already like 20-30% of the talks that were using this as a blueprint to kind of like talk through the platform that practitioners built or whatever, right? So very, very interesting to see like how quickly people adopted this, and it's for a very good reason. It's just like it gives like a really good guidance as to like, okay, how do you think about the different pieces and how they fit together? And if you go on platformengineering.org, I think slash tooling or slash platform tooling is you can see the sort of the tooling landscape there, and that also follows the same structure as the reference architecture. So that was kind of like a first step that was really helpful. But then, sort of like what I've noticed is that people were kind of like looking at this and like, okay, great, that's my target setup. Like that's how I want to build my platform. But then they were trying to do everything, at once. Like the Korean movie, like Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's kind of like that, right? Like they were trying to like, okay, like this is great, they get super excited, I get buy-in, some executives, let's go, build everything, right? And the problem with that is that, you very, very easily lose momentum, right? And this is, I think, in my opinion, is the number one cause of death of platform engineering initiatives. To be a bit morbid, but it's really like that, right? Like it's people that get really excited that have this like grand designs for what the platform is going to look like, and the problem is that the platform engineer really is a huge, org transformation, right? And so that means it touches all these different stakeholders: application developers, executives, architects, security teams, infrastructure and operations teams, and so you need to basically get all these people on board with you. Tell them effectively internally this idea of the platform and its different components that you have like so beautifully designed in your head. And so the problem is like, it's very easy to lose momentum there, right? Because you need, by the time you spoke to person A, B, C, by the time you spoke to person Z, there's been 6 months, person A completely forgot about you. And, you kind of get stuck in this process, right? And there, the trick is really to take this minimum viable product or minimum viable platform approach. I was saying, hey, start small, focus on like a subset of not only the problem that you're solving for the different stakeholders, but actually a subset of the stakeholders, right? So just focus on maybe like application developers and security teams, or infrastructure and operations team and executives, right? Like you don't have to please everybody immediately. Just focus on like, what's the low hanging fruit here? And then if you think about that reference architecture that maybe we can link in the show notes or like throw up a picture at some point, we can, you can think of like, well, let's actually focus on a subset of that, right? You don't need, your MVP to have a full, to be fully security compliant, or have the latest observability stack built in already, because you're not going to production right away with this thing, right? You need to first show the value to, for example, developers and say, hey, look, Jimmy right now is spending is waiting like 2 weeks every time he needs a database, right? And Anne is providing that. But now she's like fielding this like all this like ticket ops requests for like 40% of her time, and that sucks, right? And so what you want in the first MVP is to actually show, okay, well, I proved, for example, I reduced the time that Jimmy needs for database from like weeks to minutes, and now Amy only needs to spend like 10% of her time fielding ticket requests, not like 40-50%, right? Like, and and you can show that within weeks, right? That's really the powerful thing. I've seen like very large enterprises move incredibly fast following this MVP framework, and within weeks show some level of success internally to the stakeholders they selected. And then from there, it's like, okay, great. Are we all happy? Yes. Okay, let's go to the next iteration, right? And then of course, you should design the end design with security in mind, for example, but it doesn't mean you need to implement all the latest governance and security workflows from the get-go, because that's just going to slow you down and not going to get you to actually show value. So I think reference architectures and MVP framework have been very helpful standards and very helpful best practices that, as I said, we've been borrowing from existing disciplines already, and just like slightly tweaked to really help platform teams deliver on their initiatives.
Excellent. I mean, look, if I had a it's a bad word to use because I'm going to use that word. If I had to like just really give people in one line here, right? You don't want to boil the ocean with platform as a product. You want to do it step by step, bit by bit. Here's my question for you though. Do you need a master plan to begin with saying, okay, here's step 1 through 6. It may take me 3 months to do step 1, 4 months to do step 2, 4 months later I'll do step 3, but eventually I'll get to steps all the way through to step 6. Or do you just say, well, let's start with step 1 and then I'll decide what even step 2 is? Because I don't know if I want to make that what I'm labeling now as step 3 may wind up being step 2. Right. So I'm not locking into any of that. I'm just locking into step 1 right now.
Totally. I think it's a mix of both, to be honest. I think on some, like, the MVP framework that we have on platformengineering.org actually has like different tracks. Like you have an executive track or business track. You have like a technical track, which is basically, how you build everything, how you get the first like developer adoption. You have a security track. How do you make the security team happy, right? And I think like different tracks have different timelines and you need to, right? So like, I think for security and business, for example, it is helpful to have a little bit of, like a look into the future, right? And like, how do you attach, because, for example, like your business stakeholders, like your execs, like, usually think in quarters or even like fiscal years, right? So like, how do you attach, your platform engineering initiative to whatever their goal is, for example, for the quarter, for the year? In some cases, multi-year plans, right? On the developer adoption, though, on the other hand, like it's really what you were saying. It doesn't make sense. Just get started. Just get started. Figure out, what works, what doesn't, and then iterate from there, right? So I think there's a combination, and this is also, I think, where it's helpful to think of your platform as a product. We've built products, and the product is not just about building a product; it's also going to market with that product, right? So. And so that's where you have, I think you have basically your product engineering teams iterating very quickly on building a product, especially at the beginning, right? And then as your platform matures, you can have like longer plans and like longer iteration cycles and so on. But at the beginning, you want to be very nimble, right? And the same thing kind of like goes for your go-to-market. At the beginning, you really need to figure out, okay, which executive is going to support my initiative and so on. But then like over time, as it matures, really like attach it to like, very specific budgets or combination of budgets and so on, right? But I think it's helpful to not only think of like platform as a product as something that's like purely technical in terms of like, how do I drive developer adoption and how do I, iterate really just from a product perspective, but really broadly, like if you consider it as a product, it means like it actually needs like its own go-to-market, its own internal marketing and internal sales effectively. And actually you can see this. I was talking a while back to Aaron Erickson, who's the guy that built the internal development platform at Salesforce 5 years plus ago. And, it's very interesting because Salesforce is so big, actually at the time they had multiple platform initiatives sort of like bubbling up and competing with one another. And so there you have and obviously like in most organizations, you wouldn't have that, right? But Salesforce, because they're so big, but there's some cases of like very large engineering orgs that have similar situations. And in that case, really you're competing, right? And you're competing on the product front, but you're also competing on like distribution
on the platform.
Right?
Yeah. But I mean, look, you see that in large enterprises that are built through M&A. Right? Where you have, company A was doing this, company B had that initiative, company C. Now they're all under one, big company. And I've done this. I did a roll-up back in the .com days, right? We had 30 different acquisitions. And each one had their own, not platform per se, but their own IT, they were all storing websites. They were all website hosts. So there was 30 different platforms to host websites on. How do you pick one? Well, eventually you do want to get to one, but it took a really long time because you can't you're going to wind up breaking some eggs making that omelet. And so there's an art to that, right? That's a whole thing in and of itself.
And how did you think about that? Like, how were
Well,
you
we went
like?
bankrupt. Well, what we, I mean,
Well,
because the
that's it. That's
dot-com
easy.
bubble
That's easy.
burst. Yeah, that made it easy. I left. But no, but seriously, what we did do is we brought in, we developed one engineering team across all 30 acquisitions. One engineering team. And they basically took from each of the acquisitions what was best about them, what was the strengths. And then also looked at the wider state of art, right, in the industry. And we did. We actually built a whole new platform that we migrated these to. Some were easy migrations, some were a lot harder migrations. But we built a state-of-the-art, because back then, look, we had some companies that were using what I call baker racks, like that you would keep bread on, and they would keep white label servers on there. The hard drives are in the server's running Apache, and they got 1,000 websites on there. Right. Then we had other ones that were running like 1U web servers to network attached storage, right? A very different kind of architecture. And we had other ones that, had with load balancers and stuff. There was a variety of architecture here. And we settled on one, and it took the better part of a year and a half, 2 years to really migrate into the standard. The company was called Interliant, into the standard Interliant architecture, which, by the way, back then was like IBM Domino server or something like that. And, it was big enterprise level stuff. We were hosting a lot of apps. This is before there was cloud, multi-tenancy and all that. And we're hosting Oracle apps and Lotus Notes and Exchange and PeopleSoft and, crazy stuff in addition to websites. So we needed, and that's how I got into security. Then we had to layer security in. Checkpoint at the time was it. Checkpoint was the big firewall, right? So we had managed Checkpoint firewalls in front of this stuff. It was really cool because we were way before our time. Way, way, way before our time, right? But it wasn't anything like it. We didn't have at our fingertips what, platform teams have today, right? We were inventing this stuff out of rock and chisels. You didn't have the tools we have today, but it was interesting. It was interesting.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. And actually, it's something that like we're seeing a lot in the community as well. Like we do this trainings with large enterprises, where we kind of like help them either educating their teams or actually like putting together strategy for the rollouts and phased rollouts and so on. And I was actually working with like, I think it's public right now, but anyway, it's like a very large, maybe the largest I think CPG merger ever. And it's kind of like you have these two teams, and they sort of like are going to go in, right? It going to end up in the same setup, and sort of like one of them wants to figure out, okay, what's the right strategy for me going into this, right? Because I have like something that's working right now, but obviously everything is going to change. So like, how do I make sure that my platform evolves in a way that it ends up being the winning platform, right? From an evolutionary perspective, it's the one actually surviving in the end. So very interesting, these sort of like M&A conversations where you really see this like internal products competing with one another. Yeah.
You also see personalities competing with one another, right? And that sometimes the personalities are harder than the technologies, right? And that's a whole nother story we could talk over beers one day about. Anyway, Luca, this has been a fascinating discussion, man. I loved it.
This is fun.
As you mentioned, platformengineering.org, we've got reference architectures. We've got tools and people and documents out there to help people as we go on, as they set sail on this journey of adopting platform as a product. Wow, what a great show this was. Let's can't wait for the next one. Next one, we'll have some people joining us, so it'll be more of a active discussion, but we hope you enjoyed this. Luca, how long are you in Sri Lanka?
3 more weeks. Yes.
All right, so maybe for the next show, you'll still be there.
No. The next show is in February. So we're gonna.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna be
because these are almost mid-January. So where do you think in the world you might be by then?
Japan, maybe.
You know what? There's a KubeCon in Japan in June. I
Really
had my eyes on, but we'll see. Yeah, it's a small one. It's only 2 days.
Okay,
But,
you going?
check it out. I might. I'm looking for an excuse to go to Japan. So,
All right. Yeah.
we'll see how that goes. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, though, until then, enjoy Sri Lanka. We hope you've enjoyed the Platform Engineering Show. This is episode 3. If you haven't caught the first 2, you can. They're available on your favorite podcast platforms like Apple and Spotify and all of that. Also on TechStrong.tv. And they TechStrong.tv is the website. They're also on the YouTube, TechStrong TV YouTube. And I think hopefully by the next show, our TechStrong TV OTT channel will be up. So you'll be able to catch it on Apple TV and Roku and Amazon Fire, as well as mobile apps. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel, Luca Galente. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Alan.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.